Hello and welcome to the Outcast. I'm your host HC, and with me is.
Wolf.
And today, an episode long in the making because every time I want to do it, something else popped up. But it doesn't matter. We're here. We are here to talk about arguably one of the most important movies released this year, Nimona, based on the initially webcomic and then a published graphic novel by Andy Stevenson. If you don't know who Andy Stevenson is, he is the person behind She-Ra and the Princesses of Power. I believe the stage is properly set. So, Wolf, what was your experience with Nimona before watching the movie?
None. I did not know it was a thing.
Oh,
I will admit, I will be honest.
so I assume you also didn't know hear about the production problems this movie faced.
I did look into it after you said we were covering it, and yeah, this movie went through a lot, unfortunately.
Yeah, well, you know what? Let's just go over the production now, because to those who don't know, and if you're listening, you probably know, but let's entertain the idea.
Hmm.
The initially it's 20th session. Blah, 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 can talk, but Fox acquired the rights to do the Nimona movie, which means it was going to be produced by Blue Sky Animation. If you don't know Blue Sky Animation, Ice Age, Rio, Spies in the Skies. I think that's about the big things they've done. Am I missing something? I
Yeah, I
think
would
that's
say
the.
Rio,
Mhm.
Spies in Disguise, Ice Age is definitely the big one.
Yeah.
Did they do that Pirates film? I think they did that one too. I think that one was really
They
popular.
when they did it like the stop motion one with David Tennant.
Yeah, was that them?
I am not sure.
I feel like that's them, but maybe it wasn't them.
Anyway,
Yeah,
but
looking it up, it
anyway,
was not them. Yeah, just
but
Ice
like
Age. They're the Ice Age
yeah,
people.
but like Ice Age is their big one. Ice
Yeah.
Age is the one that for better or worse, because man, did that franchise outlived its welcome. But Blue Sky were in plans to do that.
I'll
They've
say
been
I
doing
like
it
Ice
for.
Age more than I did Minions.
Yeah, but anyway, Blue Sky was was full ahead into production of an Nimona movie. It was slated to release in theaters in 2019, but there was COVID and something else happens, which is Disney bought Fox. And
Yes.
when they bought Fox, they shut down Blue Sky, and the Nimona movie was canceled. You can probably guess the reasons as to why. You can the silence implies that you can guess the reasons as to why. Moving on. So,
Well, I mean, lest we can say it, Disney are cowards. That's why the movie was canceled. They didn't want to put out a movie with
let's
a LGBT relationship within it. That's all I'll say, so we
yeah,
don't spoil anything for those who may not have
just
seen it.
let's say there are queer elements in the original graphic novel. We'll get to it in a bit, but the movie is a lot more heavy-handed with that. Not that it's a bad thing. I'm saying this is a good thing. I'm just saying if you had to go, because all the LGBTQ stuff in the graphic novel is gonna it's implied. You know what I mean? It's like it's there if you want to look at it like that, sure, but it's not in the movie. It's like it's there.
Hmm.
There's no way of looking behind that.
No,
So
it is worth saying, right, to maybe possibly give Disney the teeniest little amount of credit that this has only ever been stated by like a few former staff members of Blue Sky that the film received pushback from Disney leadership because of its LGBT themes. But
at the
and
same
this was
time,
stated
consider
after the fact during other
like
Disney controversies. But at the
yeah,
same time, it's Disney, so you
yeah.
know
Well, let's
I'm
say
inclined to believe
obviously,
them.
obviously, most of the like noise that came out of it were from people who worked at Blue Sky, and were devastated by the film cancellation. And but you know what? I'll take their word for it, considering other controversy. Because this was also around the same time when when Disney signed that they supported the say no to gating. I don't remember what the bill was called, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
It also other stuff happened, like there was the entire thing with the Owl House, which got the third season cut by a major lot because of this entire thing. Yeah, and like you could say, oh, they are just people, trying to look for a source to blame, and Disney is an easy target. But let's be honest, there's a lot of base for this. There are, and don't quote me, but I think Andy Stevenson was also like, yeah, if blame the mouse. I don't quote me. But I think there was. I think he had something to say about that. Regardless, though, Netflix picked up the movie, and we have it now. What's interesting here is that apparently the movie was like 70% done at Blue Sky before it was canceled, and from what I gathered, most of the things that like most of it ended up making it to the finished film.
Yeah, from what I
So
understand, from what I understood reading, like most of the work you see in the film is more or less Blue Sky. Blue Sky's never going to
mhm.
really get the credit for the film, unfortunately, anymore. It's going to go to
No,
Annapurna Pictures,
I
but
think in the credits, they do give them like a special
oh, they
shout out or
okay.
something. There's a shout out to Blue Sky in
I
the
might have missed
movie.
it.
I know that there's a shout out at some place, but and also like there was no. It's the same voice cast from the Blue Sky version. And again, if it was 70% done, that probably means that animation did start. So, and considering early screenshots, it looks similar to the final movie. Regardless, the movie is out, and we are here to talk about it 2 months before after it came out because it's still kind of relevant. Which I want to point out, the movie came out on Netflix the same weekend as Pixar's Elemental opened, and Elemental is one of I know it's been doing better at the box office since then, but Elemental is one of the worst openings to a Pixar movie, and Nimona blew up in streaming. Karma, I think they say.
Yeah, I didn't even know Pixar released a new film.
Uh, that's how badly Disney marketed this. So
Now,
yeah,
and to be fair, I didn't know Nimona was a thing either, but I think that gets a little bit of a break here because it was released on streaming, and Netflix sometimes just says, "Hey, here's the thing, bye," and doesn't like advertise at all. Hardly, it feels
no, like
like.
Nimona. I don't want to say that they advertise that they advertised Nimona like crazy, but
No,
it had more than one trailer. There was some noise around it. People talked, and but I think most of the reason that people talked is because Netflix did kind of pick it up after Disney, sent it, basically sent it to die, but. There was talk about Nimona, and regardless of if you know the graphic novel or not, there's a pre-existing fan base for this, and especially it's Andy Stevenson from She-Ra and other stuff. People were keeping an eye out for it.
yeah, yeah, absolutely.
So this is the point where I just say before we talk about the movie itself. Um, Jaya, my good friend, was kind enough to gift me the graphic novel for a birthday a few years ago. The thing is that I didn't have the chance to reread it, so anything I say about the comic is from memory only. Keep that in mind. To if there are any people who wanna grab me by the word, it's been a while since I read it. Cut me a bit of slack.
I've not
Now,
read it.
no, I have more experience with it than you, so yeah.
Fair, fair, fair.
That's so the movie itself, non-spoilers yet. Wolf, what did you think about Nimona?
I liked it. I'll admit, when you recommended it to me, I looked it up a little bit before we got the chance to cover it, and decided, this looks interesting. Not sure this is gonna be a good film, but we'll see. And then I get to sit down and watch it, and it's like, this is actually really fun, like enjoyably fun. You know,
Yeah.
for like it looks like one of those movies of, what's a great example here? It looks like one of those slightly cheaper animated movies, like
I'll
where
tell
you
you
where you go
what.
into it going, this might not be good, but it might be okay, and then you come out of this one and be like, wow, that was actually really enjoyable. I mean, it feels a bit quick, maybe, but still very enjoyable. Like a bit rushed, maybe, but still very enjoyable.
I'll, t- I'll tell you what. I think some of it. One of the things I'll give Nimona is that, in a way, you can see this as either style or no budget or whatever. There's no animated film that really looks like Nimona
No,
these days.
and
Like
I
it doesn't
seen
look like another Blue Sky movie. It doesn't look.
no,
It doesn't even do like the Spider Verse thing. It doesn't look like a Disney movie. It's really its own beast, and in a lot, and like it looks great. You know,
yeah, like
it,
I
it,
in motion, I enjoyed seeing it a lot more than I did like
I'll tell
just
you what.
still images, I would say.
Because I think the main thing in terms of the animation is that the character animation is excellent. The
Mhm.
expressions, the movement, the speed, like the and you know the and just the quickness of it. That's great. It's the backgrounds that look a bit unfinished. Like some backgrounds look okay, some less.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would say like it's definitely the character animation that you're going to be focused on the most here, and which is fair.
Mm,
I mean, you probably should be, but it's nice to have those nicer backgrounds from time to time. But they do take way more of a back seat and become kind of bland to a degree, right? It's just not as good to look at.
yeah.
Which you
Hmm.
can argue good or bad, right? How important is that to a
You
film?
know, I want to give them the benefit of the doubt that either it's a stylistic thing, or maybe, or I don't really want to blame the production problems, because I don't know because production problems or not, I think if it wasn't supposed to look like this, somebody would have cut it at some point. Someone would have said, we can touch this up. So I'm willing to say this is probably a style, and for the first time using that style, they did great with what they have. Maybe if other movies try to replicate that, we can get something truly incredible. But it's a good first attempt.
Yeah, like yeah, I'm like I have no complaints in that regard. Like I will say the soundtrack was a bit meh because it's mostly just a lot of pop songs, which is okay, but eh,
I guess,
just That's
I'll
all I
tell you
can
what.
say.
It's not because it's not something that's there all the time. Like what? There's like one, two of those.
Like three, maybe four, personally, were in this one.
Hmm.
At least three.
I don't know. I'm like it didn't bother me as much.
I mean, it
I didn't.
doesn't bother me. It's just one of those
Mm,
things of I'm just not as into it, right? You know,
yeah. Okay.
old
That's fine.
man. So it's one of those things of like it stands out, and it's kind of like, and it's kind of a thing of it just doesn't stick with me as much, right? And I
Uh,
enjoy when a movie goes into its own style more with stuff
yeah.
like that.
Hmm.
But it's not
Well,
the end of a film.
either way,
It's
either
just
way,
me
I
being
do
nitpicky.
appreciate this movie for having its own style, and that again, that I'm looking at it, and there isn't really anything that looks like this movie until by this point, right? Like, though I'm sure, like with Into the Spider Verse, there would be people like, "Hey, we can do this too, but different."
No, like yeah, I definitely agree. I love the stylization for the animation. I love the stylization for the art style itself. Like it feels very different, and it feels very good to watch in motion. I would say,
Mhm.
looking at
Yeah.
stills of it, still images, I don't think does it justice. Looking at a
Mhm.
GIF, that does it a lot
It's
more justice.
definitely it's definitely a movie that like you should see it in motion, instead
Yeah,
of seeing pics of it. Like a pic would get you sold on like maybe the colors or the character designs or something, but you need to see because there's a point like whenever Nimona changes her face in this movie, like all of her expressions are hilarious. And like and I think one of the things that makes her so funny is that again, there's nothing that quite moves like her. We've seen, facial expressions on a character is an important thing in animation. We've seen it done a lot of times, but there's something so snappy about it. It looks almost hand drawn, but you can tell it looks a bit like a 60 FPS video game cutscene.
Yeah, no, I completely agree.
Mm. So, and it looks great.
But
It looks
even
super good.
going beyond that for me too, right? I love the world here, just like this
Mhm.
medieval future kingdom. It's just so,
Yeah, that's
it's just
that's
like a
something that really
weird
struck me.
combination, but in my opinion, works surprisingly
Yeah,
enough.
that's something that the struck, that struck a chord with me since the graphic novel. That it's like medieval. There are knights. There are
But there's
knights.
also
There are
laser guns and,
yeah.
flying
It's
cars.
it's it's like if the medieval times never left, but they developed. Yeah, it's not the same thing, but kind of like how Horizon, yeah, the PlayStation game, like
Hmm.
that the humans kind of went back to the prehistoric ages, but there is technology in the
Yes.
creatures and everything. It felt like another take on that idea, even though this I know the comic was way before Horizon, but if I need to compare it to something.
No, no, that's fair. Like that's a good example. It's that weird, but also it surprisingly works well combination of old thing with future thing, and it just works, right? But this one I
Mhm.
think melds it way more than Horizon did, because Horizon, there was this wall between the two almost, right? And that's the point. But for this, it's just the medieval aspects are completely fused with the future aspects, because you still have knights running around with swords, and yet you have people running around with laser crossbows, and it's like, this is fun. This is weird, but it's fun.
Yeah, again, it's something that we've never really seen before, and not and I brought Horizon up as like a how to combine like old with new, but it's very different than what's here. This is literally a medieval town which acts like a New York of some sort, and there is social media, there is technology, and all of that, and it might be a bit of a tough pill to swallow to some, but like once you accept that, it's a really cool world that was never done before in something like this. That's and major credit for it.
Agreed.
Um, the so the is there anything else to say that's non-spoilery for you, or should we just dive into it?
Uh, go watch it. It's good.
If you haven't already.
Hmm.
Oh, you know what? Go watch it again. I've seen it once when it came out, and I saw it today this morning before we started recording. I wanted to refresh my memory. So that being said, spoilers to Nimona start in three, two, one. Still here? Okay. So, um, interesting thing that I want to ask you about it first. That first time seeing the movie, I felt like Nimona's little arc about being called a monster and the fact that it's actually get to her, and that it's her the one thing that impacts her in a bad way that she doesn't like. I felt like it came a bit out of nowhere the first time through, and when it suddenly took over the plot, I'm like, huh, great idea. Just wish it was built up more. But on the second viewing I did a few hours ago, I actually found out that they built up to it a lot more than I remembered. It was like my one gripe with the movie just suddenly like gone on a second viewing. Like, was it something that occurred to you?
I've only watched the film one time so far, and I caught a lot
No.
of the build up, so it never felt like it was out of nowhere. I think my issue with it, and even with the second viewing, I don't think this issue would change personally as of right now. But
Yeah.
I will say my issue with it is it just feels a bit too quick, and that comes back to the movie in general. It feels too quick, right? Like we get from point A to point B a little bit too quickly, and I feel like there's some moments that would have been better if they were given more time to breathe a bit. But it is, it is like an animated film in the way it is, so I understand the quickness of it, right? Like
Yeah.
it's worth noting, right? This is only a 99-minute runtime.
Hmm.
That's about
Yeah, it's
hour and a half. Oh,
but at the same time, I also appreciate the fact that there's no. uh, I get what you mean that some parts feel a bit rushed, but it didn't feel rushed to the point of like I really felt like I needed more of this. I felt actually it's a movie that like it knows how to use its time
No,
well.
I do think it uses a lot of that time well, but the one thing I think suffers a bit for it is maybe Nimona herself as a character and her
Mhm.
little and her arc. I think that's the one
Yeah.
thing that suffers somewhat from it being shorter and a little bit quick.
Because I'll tell you what kind of I noticed on the first viewing is that I felt that Nimona is supposed to be like the audience surrogate that we see the aftermath of the opening through her eyes, and the stories about. By the way, I could never pronounce these names, so please, I apologize if I'm going to butcher the names, but. Baltazar and whatever the other knight's name is. Fuck, I can't. What do you remember his
Ambrosius.
name?
Yeah,
Yeah,
Ballister and Ambrosius.
yeah. So it feels like we see their conflict through Nimona. She's the audience surrogate, who is there to she's the one we're supposed to connect to, and we see the story of these two unfold through her eyes. And suddenly, the middle of the movie, it suddenly changes to am I a monster? And everyone calls me that and doesn't get me. Would I ever fit in this society? And I think this is one big thing that the transition from one to the other is still a bit rushed. I cut more hints towards it the second go around, which does make it better and less out of nowhere than what I was initially saying. But it still felt a bit weird to suddenly change the focus of the movie in the middle.
I have a question for you, right? Because I was
Yeah.
thinking this after watching it. Do you think this would have been I have like I like this enough that I kind of want more, and I think it
Mhm.
might have been better as a show, but I definitely would love to see it as a show, right?
It's interesting. I was about to bring this up because the graphic novel has a very, show vibe to it. Like it splits into chapters, and each chapter is kind of like, takes place a bit after the other. There's an overarching plot,
That's
but
probably not
it
surprising because I think Indy Stevenson has a lot of experience script writing, right?
yeah. And again, this was something he did as a web comic initially. So we
Mhm.
probably he started it as, a few short stories in that world. And because so I think it was only when this was picked up by a publisher that it started getting more of an overall story.
Mhm.
But yeah, like the graphic novel does feel a bit like, like a show. Like there's a very episodic feeling to it. So obviously, when you turn this into a movie, which needs to have that three-act structure, there would be some, there would be some like, oh, this is how you do this. Okay, this is how we're gonna transition from one to the other. All right. And I'll be honest with you, I was surprised that the movie ended the way it did.
Agreed. It's
Again,
definitely quick.
not necessarily in the matter of quick, not even in terms
Mhm.
of it was rushed or something, but I was like, really, we are going to push through to this part of the story. We're going to do not again, not to one as far as I remember, but this is our climax. We're actually rushing all the way to this part because it felt like it could have been something that would be a climax of a sequel. You get me?
Oh, yeah, no, fair. You're talking about with like them with Nimona turning into the giant monster and,
Yeah, this
I
feels
believe
like
it's
something that
Gorth, yeah, the
it
director,
felt
or no,
like
the
something.
director.
And for the record, it's well done. It's earned in this movie. I just felt like
No, not Gorth.
maybe in terms of because I recall very vaguely that something like this happens in the comic. The thing is, I think maybe if we want to do this, not just right away into a one movie, maybe wait until. To be honest, who knew if they were even sure they were gonna get a sequel, Blue Sky or Netflix. So
True.
so I understand, kind of trying to jam everything into one, but I believe this climax would probably work, but it works great as is. But I feel like maybe it would have worked better if it was like, wrapping up a duology or a trilogy or something.
Do you think there would have been a good place in the story to stop, since you're more familiar with the comic or with the graphic novel?
Honestly, something I should probably bring up again from memory here.
True, true.
The the Nimona and Balthazar are kind of. I'll say Balthazar is a bit more sympathetic than in the comics, but Nimona is basically the same. Abrocious, whatever the fuck his name is. he's in the comic he's a lot more goody two shoes. Is He's a bit more of a himbo in the comics, I guess you could say. And in
Mm-hmm.
the movie, in the movie, he's a lot more serious. He's a lot more competent, and he's a lot more reasonable.
I've not
Um,
read the graphic novel, obviously, but
yeah,
I
and
feel like I would enjoy the film version of Ambrosius more.
no, definitely no. Ambrosius is way better in the movie. So the other thing is that also the reason so the characters, at least Nimona and to some extent Balthazar, are kind of similar to their comic counterparts, but the story is real, not really different, but it's, how do I say this?
Cut
Not
down,
sure if it's the
maybe.
best not sure if it's the best comparison, but it's kind of like, how there's a book How to Train Your Dragon and there's a movie How to Train Your Dragon.
Mm-hmm.
So like it's a
Ah,
similar, maybe not the best example here. Let me, if I
I
have
get you.
any.
Like there's two very different stylizations of the story here, right? Like one story
Okay, you
is
know what?
very different.
Yeah, like maybe another better example is, you know how there's the Civil War comic by Marvel, but then there's Captain America Civil War. It's the same. It's the same overall idea, and it was the same characters to an extent, but the basis of it, the events which lead to it, are very different. Same thing.
Mm-hmm.
The one thing that I can tell you that happens in the comic that also happens in the movie is Nimona just drops herself in Balthazar's home and it's like, "Hey, you're a villain. I want to be your sidekick."
Okay, fair, fair.
That's the one that, like, the reason that Balthazar is no longer with the palace is different. Like, again, in the movie it's like, oh, he's been framed by the director that he killed the queen. There's no such thing. There's no just such thing in the comic. Like,
Mm.
he leaves out of, honestly, he leaves out of spite. And like, well, in the movie it's like, I want to bring down the director, not the entire, not the entire palace. In this one, it's like, no, like, if other people go down with my plan, then you know what, sacrifices have to be made. He's kind of like that.
I see, I see. Is it
Um,
still
uh,
is Ballister still like the general same? Is the idea very much like he's trying to clear his name still, or is it like very
no,
much of
no,
okay?
he's
So it's
not.
not
No, again, that's what I tried to tell you.
okay.
Like in the movie,
I
it's
missed
like,
it.
oh, he needs to clear his name. He's been wrong. In the graphic novel, it's like he leaves the past because honestly, he's just kind of bitter and annoyed with the other one. I think also he loses to Abrocious in some sort of thing. I don't, again, it's been a while. But one thing I remember, that Ambrosius and Balthazar's relationship, again, in the comic it's only kind of really hinted at that they love each other. In here it's explicit. They
Hmm.
they are dating, and like, good, and good for them, right?
Hmm.
But ironically enough, the way I would describe them in the comic is kind of like Megamind and Metroman, if you remember Megamind.
Yep.
They are basically the same in terms of, oh, they are a hero and a villain who've been doing this for so long that now they just kind of play into it. They kind of know, oh, we meet. Okay, this is the point where we monologue. This is the point where I beat you. They kind of just know that they have a role to play. Essentially,
Yeah.
that's what they're like in the comic. Um, and the one thing though that Nimona being connected to that the one that they have the statue of in the city. I forgot her name. God damn it, what was it? The
Glorious.
names are really complicated in this fucking movie,
It's
but
fair. Glorious.
glorious, yeah. So the flashback showing her and Nimona actually being friends a long time ago, that's added to the movie. It's implied, but in the comic.
Hmm. The more hearing you talk about it, like nothing against the comic, right? But I do think I like a lot of the changes the movie made hearing you talk about it, right?
Yeah. And at the end of the day, I would say it's really a matter of, apples and oranges
Oh
to
yeah,
some
absolutely,
extent.
right? Like there are
But
plenty of people
I would
who,
say,
you
though,
brought it up. There are plenty of people who love the movies for How to Train Your Dragon, but dislike the books, and there are people who love the books but dislike the movies. That's one of those ones where I enjoy them both for different reasons, right? And I'd probably enjoy them both here for different reasons, but
I would
having
say
not
that as
experienced the comic yet, I do prefer, as of now, the changes that the film made.
I would, as someone who did read the comic and again has some vague memories of it. I Overall I would say I prefer the movie, but it's also because I'm just overall more of a movie person than a comic person.
Fair, fair.
So that could really fit just me, that I feel more comfortable rewatching a movie than rereading a comic. But again, that's just me.
Hmm,
It's a totally subjective thing,
absolutely.
but I do think that they were looking at this comic and you can tell that Andy Stevenson was involved in this. It wasn't just like, yeah, just give me money, the IP is yours, do whatever you want, just make sure to credit me. You can tell he was actually involved, and I want to say that some of the changes might have even been his influence, considering Shira.
Possible. I mean, we should definitely talk about the elephant in the room. That's not really an elephant. It's not. This film's not super
And it's probably
subtle.
not the fact that Nimona doesn't transform into an elephant once in this movie.
True. But yeah, like
Like
it's
how
this
many
movie's.
animals?
Oh
Not,
Lord,
not,
a
yeah. So
rhino, a crocodile, I think, dragon,
there's an ostrich,
an
there's a
ostrich.
dragon, there's an armadillo. There are plenty. There are plenty.
But
And
yeah,
there's a
like
shark, of course. How could I forget the shark? They dance with the shark. Yeah.
listen, some of my
So
favorite moments is seeing her transform, and the knight's just freaking the fuck out.
yeah,
Like the film gets that so well of them just absolutely getting their asses handed to them by her transformations into different animals and them just being absolutely terrified of her.
yeah. And by the way, Todd, like that. As
Oh,
I told a friend of mine, the basically the Steve Palchuk of this movie. I When he just crashes in the climax and he go like when he's crashing into the neon sign and he goes, bro. I remember telling Jaya when we were watching this. Imagine if this were his last words. Imagine if he didn't survive that. Can you imagine someone just dying and his last words being, bro?
it's so good though. It's
Yeah,
so good.
he survives because, of course, he does. But it was kind of funny, and also nice to kind of see the bully character, to lack of a better term here, but to see this character that's just against our protagonists at all costs. It's nice to see him actually being somewhat competent when it comes to doing his job.
Still a little bit of a goof a blockhead.
Yeah,
An
yeah,
idiot.
mm,
But like in a different way. He's still competent at his job, but he's still kind of dumb too.
yeah.
He's the himbo bully.
Um,
That they had to, Ambrosius was the himbo, so they just gave it all to Thod
Yeah, I know.
or Todd.
But again, for the better, I prefer Ambrosius in this movie to the graphic novel
Yeah.
personally.
But yeah, like getting back to it, what I was going to say, right? This movie's not subtle about its messaging, which is,
Mhm.
about, transitioning and the idea of trans people, right? And some of the stuff that's going on there. Not
Funny you
surprising.
mention it. I want to say that it's funny you mention it because because the Nimona the comic started before Andy Stevenson went through his transition.
Yeah, which is probably
And,
not surprising that Nimona covers that.
and that's the thing that people ask them at the time if this is what it's supposed to imply, and he's like, sure, you can read into it, and then suddenly he goes do through the transition. It's like, huh, huh, you know.
Mm.
If this was his own way of finding it, then what, good for you. In case you listen to this, like peace and all that, but
Well,
kind of funny to look back.
where the comic was probably more subtle about it, the movie is not subtle. Because, I mean, again, right, you have an entire line from Nimona where, like, not shape shifting makes her feel awful, right? Like, she has to shape shift, stuff like that. It's like, I see you, movie. I get you. I know exactly what you're
Let's
saying.
say though something though, not that line, but because one of the thing in the comic is that she lies about being given the ability to transform into all of those animals from a witch, and then she admits that she lies about it because she just prefers, to people just, accept her as she is. It doesn't matter
Hmm.
who, it doesn't matter why. What matters is that the, she can do that, but judge her as her personality. And in a way, the movie kind of touches upon it because in the movie she tells Balthazar that she tells him that it was through a wishing well. And while it's not really, she doesn't really say if it's a lie or not, but it's implied that she just made up another story just for the sake of this is my explanation. You want to take it, you don't, I don't care.
Yeah, this is one of
Just
those. It very much came off to me. It's like, okay, I'm fucking with you because it doesn't matter why I can. It just matters that I can. You should just accept that sort of deal. Which
mhm.
again, a little bit more of that heavy-handedness. But we've talked about this before. But I do think, and I think we both came to the same agreement way back then, that maybe subtlety and maybe like lack of subtlety and heavy-handedness nowadays is needed somewhat for films to a
Yeah,
degree.
like I remember because not how long ago was it? Like I was still in college, so it was a few years ago. Okay,
Hmm.
maybe like 4 or 5 years ago ish. I remember someone in college telling me, "Why do you think we need representation? Gays and the LGBTQ community in general are accepted these days." And it's like, no, like yeah, better
It's
than what was before for
that's a question
sure,
that you can
but
say, yeah, but no.
yeah,
That's
there you
the
go.
answer
Like
to that question.
I get you are aware that I haven't seen any, but I'm willing to bet you that Nimona has detractors just because of
Oh
the
yeah,
LGBTQ in
I would
it,
not be
and
surprised.
nothing more, and
Like,
nothing, and like nothing more. They would call it, better go see a real movie than that woke agenda shit.
mm,
People, those idiots are out there, okay? And yes, I'm gonna keep calling them idiots because if you judge a movie only based on that, you're an idiot. Nothing more I can say.
but again, like that's
But
right. That's the current duality we live in. A film like Nimona can be made, but also a film like Nimona was going to be canceled by Disney and possibly never get made. So it's like, and that's like the duality we live in currently. So yes, but no is the answer to that question. And
yes, but you see, that's the thing. Sometimes, and I kind of like in the because for one, it's you can say that it's heavy-handed, but I feel like it's heavy-handed in the right
yes,
way.
I would agree.
It's done well because there's also a line she said, it doesn't matter why I'm Nimona. There's no, it doesn't matter if
That's a
she's a
big one too.
rhino or an ostrich or whatever. That's who she is, and we are gonna accept it, and we love her that way. Now, when it comes to if it's supposed to represent something, considering Andy Stevenson's transition, I would say probably, but at the same time, if it's too much gay for you, I have two words for you: Teen Titans, you have Beast Boy. He has the same power basically. That's not a trend. People can see this as a representation for something. People can see it as that's just his power. If the gay bothers you so much, people, then this power doesn't need to represent anything to you.
I,
That's simple.
I mean, fair. Yeah, absolutely. I would still argue. I think the film is definitely trying to send a message,
Oh,
personally.
no doubt about it.
But
No doubt about it. It is,
but
but
absolutely, you don't have to. I mean, it's worth saying. Like, you don't have to see those messages. You don't have to, care about them per se. They're
like
not there for
other
you necessarily, right? If you want to notice them and you want to see them, great. Enjoy that. Enjoy that stuff, because it's fun when you get to see that and get to experience that and get to have those conversations about it. But if you don't want to, you don't have to. You can just go in, enjoy the film,
yeah,
and
like
walk
actually,
out.
I had a conversation. I had a conversation with a friend not long ago that to some people, The Little Mermaid was essentially a trans story. It was their trans awakening, and even though I don't think I didn't see it when I first because when I was a kid I didn't know it was a thing. I'm sorry, but
Fair, fair.
but if this is how and you could argue that this is not what the movie intended to do, but if it helped you and that's how you saw it, go
Yeah,
but if you didn't see it and you won't be able to see it, great, just don't be a douche about it.
yeah. Pretty simple.
So same
Unfortunately, it's
applies
hard
to
for some people to
Nimona.
get, but it's pretty simple.
Yeah, man, well, to be honest, we live in a society where
True. One day, maybe.
and maybe one
We'll
day
get there.
we can actually, yeah.
Small
Well,
steps, unfortunately, but
something.
we'll
As
get
much as
there.
we dunk about it, well, as much as we dunk about Disney's LGBTQ stuff, and don't get me wrong, they deserve it. We did get the Owl House. We did get a lesbian kiss in Lightyear. Even they sometimes the mouse manages to show other colors, but who knows? Who knows?
Listen, as I've always said, we're Disney. We're not slow. You're just moving too fast. They'll get there eventually.
Uh, uh, something. Considering Kingdom Hearts 3 is a thing for a few years now. Maybe that became a fucking reality. So who knows? All right. Anyway, back to Nimona here.
Mhm.
What were we even talking about?
I mean, we
I
talked a
we
little bit about some of the comedic moments with the knights and Nimona's transformations, which are great. Like, this film got quite a few laughs out of me. Very much loved it
yeah.
for that purpose alone. If honest,
Actually, one thing I saw people say is that Nimona's character may be or make it or break it for this movie. What do you think?
I hmm, I'll be honest. Nimona's
Mm-hmm.
character, up until the later half, wasn't the one that stuck with me for a long while. For this movie, I was kind of, and you talked about this earlier, where you felt like Nimona was kind of the audience surrogate for watching Ballister and Ambrosius's story, and those were the two characters that I stuck with the most for a good
Mm-hmm.
portion of the film, until that, like, last later, I don't want to say half, maybe quarter, where
Mm-hmm.
you get way more of Nimona, and then it's like, okay, like, this character has won me over now, because beforehand she was just kind of there to a degree, like mostly comedic with a little bit of, there's more for you. I don't know. I kind of know what it is, but looking at the film and what it's giving me a little bit, but I'm curious to see if they're going to pull that off. But for now, these two were kind of my go-to. And honestly, I would say even now, still kind of my favorite characters, Ballister and Ambrosius,
Yeah.
and their story and their relationship.
Mm-hmm. Again, it feels a bit right. I'm not
Yeah, no,
sure if this
I
is
agree with
something.
you.
It to some, and again, not in a bad way. The movie still works. The movie is still great, but I feel that somewhere along the line, I'm not sure if it was Blue Sky that weren't sure if it was it was gonna get a sequel or not. Maybe it was an executive decision to just try and adapt everything. Maybe it was Andy Stevenson wanting to adapt everything. I'm not sure, but it feels like there were two movies here that were forced to merge into one.
And to be fair, it still works even though they were.
Again, yeah, it works. It works. I want to emphasize that the movie is great.
But it
But
definitely feels like because of that, Nimona takes a back seat for a while for these two, and then Nimona, like I would say, around the area where Ballister and Ambrosius have their issues with one another, and you're getting very close to the end with the director and her being the villain and everything.
Mhm.
That's about the time where okay, Nimona's front and center now. Like it's around that time where you get the Glorith flashback as well, right, with Nimona and Glorith,
Yeah.
and that's when you start
No,
to see more of.
the Glory flashback is actually more near the end. This is more third act
Well, yeah, it's like
stuff.
a little bit, before, just a little bit before that, right? Not much before
Mhm.
that is where you start to see, okay, Nimona's taking more of the front seat now as her, and now we're focusing a bit more on her and Ballister's relationship, right?
Yeah,
And
and
but for most of the
like
film, I feel Nimona takes a bit of a backseat, which isn't a major problem because it works well, and I think it's probably maybe to the film's credit because I don't know if character-wise Nimona could pull the entire film as a character being front and center personally.
yeah, because I think it's also the thing that in the comic it might be named after her, but she's also not necessarily the front and center of the comic. It's like those three characters, and not again, she's leading the story, but you could argue the story isn't necessarily about her.
Which is fine.
Hmm. Like, to kind of compare it to another movie, another animated movie we covered here, which came out this year, same month even, Across the Spider Verse.
Mm,
The movie focuses on Miles Morales, but you could argue that, like, Miles Morales is your protagonist, but you could argue that it was more Gwen's story in that movie to an
fair.
extent.
I definitely felt, that's a great comparison. I will say I think, I mean, maybe it's because we already had a movie with him, right? But I do think Miles can carry more as the main character if he needs to than what Nimona
because
can.
but I think it's also the fact, because you know I know he's not necessarily the same Spider-Man as Peter Parker, and he's never meant to be, but
Mm,
people can also connect to Spider-Man immediately
yeah,
because Spider-Man by definition holds a lot of meanings to a lot of people.
true. And
And so in that way, it is kind of hard to compare the two, because you're comparing a villain sidekick who's very hyperactive and is very deadly, and because okay, I'll get to it in a bit, but and you compare, I can't really see her being compared to a Spider-Man, someone that people already has a lot of expectations of who is supposed to be
yeah,
beforehand, because it's something that's been a lot that's been out for a while.
yeah,
You have a basic idea of what this is supposed to be.
yeah. If you look at
Now,
if you look at Miles, if just the Spider Verse films, there's at least two versus one. But then you look at all of Spider Man and all of potentially Miles Morales that existed beforehand, and it's like there's a lot more coming into that one than there is Nimona. So that's fair.
yeah, but in terms of just a movie structure, because I'm also bringing up Across the Spider Verse because we talked about this when we covered it. You know, kind of spoiler to that if you haven't seen it for some reason. Skip ahead a few seconds. That Across the Spider Verse doesn't technically end. There's this to be continued,
Mm,
and people have brought up that the story doesn't really end and will only continue in the next one, which is a fair point. But I feel like in that way, both Across the Spider Verse and Nimona kind of play with how we see movies these days. We are so used to movies that just have the traditional three acts structure. So when one ends on a cliffhanger, and the main character's story isn't finished yet, and one where you could argue the focus of the movie changes in the middle. Maybe it's just a matter that they are trying something new with the way we tell stories in movies now. And if it works for you or not, it's your thing, but nonetheless appreciated.
I mean, it's at the very least, it's something new, right? In
Yeah,
an
and
era
it's
with
something
a
we can talk
lot
about.
of
It's something.
remakes and a lot of, honestly, just kind of Disney doing the same thing over and over again, or to a
Yeah.
degree. Like, there's a lot
Why
of
is
stuff,
Moana getting a remake? I'm sorry.
like, yeah, a lot of remakes and a lot of, just essentially Marvel at this point. It's nice to see some new stuff, right? There's just a lot of
Hmm.
stuff that's going on that's
And
too similar.
especially
And
because both
we're
Spider
saying that,
Verse
and
and
it's still fucking
Nimona.
Spider Man, but still,
No, I was about to say though that in a way both Nimona and Spider Verse are adaptations. Spider Verse is even a sequel to an adaptation, and in a long running franchise. So it's nice to see something that's it might be for both of them might be based on an existing IP, but you know what? It's nice to see that they use existing IPs to actually try new water and new ways to tell stories. Either if
agreed.
they want to do, even if the way we pace stories these
Which is
days, it it may not be perfect and it still might throw some people off to some degree, but you know what, I if there's one thing I'll always give a filmmaker credit for is ballsiness.
which
So
is, I mean, I know this isn't like a Spider Man or Spider Verse like episode, right? But it does make me smile a little bit that way back in the day, Spider-Man was the first, superhero movie to really set us up with the current version of superhero movies and films that we have today, right? Like they
to,
tried something new and different with Spider-Man, and that's like, okay, we can do superhero films now, and that kind of set the ball in motion to once again Spider-Man saying, "Hey, we can change it up again." I kind of smile at that and just kind of love that, like Spider-Man once again setting the ball in motion for something possibly very different.
as a longtime Spider-Man fan, I'm gonna say, well, of course, he's fucking Spider-Man. He's amazing.
All right, I hate him again.
But yeah, no, definitely get what you mean because yeah, after a bit of a slump with comic book movies, the first Sam Raimi Spider-Man movie was that and the first X-Men, I want to say.
Yeah, like they were very, they kind of, not gonna say they were great or amazing, but they definitely set something new up to the brought something new to the table, right? And they said, hey, there's different things you can do here, and it was nice to see back then, and it's nice to see
Yep,
now.
definitely. Hmm. So yeah,
I mean,
I respect trying something new with
yeah,
those things.
absolutely. And like getting back to Nimona, I
Yeah.
we mentioned her before, right? Like I think we have to talk about it. The Glorith flashback, that was so good, and just seeing like everything with Nimona turning into the monster and deciding,
Yeah.
okay, no one wants me, no one loves me, no one cares about me, so I'm just gonna literally go kill myself on her sword, essentially. It's
Yeah,
like,
and
damn, that was
honestly,
so
just
good though. Like
it,
for a
like this
character
is great.
that felt kind of backgroundish for a little bit
Hmm.
of this movie, I feel like they really brought her back well, right? Like there's
Hmm.
some moments between her and Ballister where the relationship was really good and enjoyable, and there was those good moments there, but she still didn't feel like front and center. Like it felt like the movie, like my impression of the movie going in had what I had thought of her as being, and this moment was what brought her back and brought her back very well. Seeing everything that came
Hmm.
from that, it's
Yep,
just done
agreed.
so
Uh,
well.
and this is the point I was gonna lead into it, but we got sidetracked.
Sorry.
I've seen a review say that they didn't like Nimona's character.
Hmm.
And the reason I'm bringing this up is because I don't agree with this review at all, for the record. But I also think, do you think this character could be an acquired taste? Because I loved her character. I love these kind of characters that are super energetic, talk really fast, and are 100% dominate the scene whenever they're in it. But do you,
I
do you think she's an acquired taste? Because I can see some people not connecting to that energy.
I think possibly, yeah. I mean, remember I mentioned earlier, right, that if I list the favorite characters, Nemona's not at the top for me. It would be Ballister and Ambrosius that would be at the top. then Nimona
Hmm.
after them two. And
Yeah.
does that mean she's an acquired taste? I think, yeah, possibly. I think there's definitely a bit of, you know, you're either gonna love her or hate her.
Hmm.
Possibly. At the very least, I think, you're gonna come out of the film thinking you either love Nimona or Nimona had some good moments and you're like, that was good. I enjoyed her, but she's not my favorite. And I think that's
Yeah,
kind of where I
because
set. Like, definitely Nimona came back a lot for me because of the ending here, right? And how they played that and how they did so well with that.
hmm yeah, well, agreed. I was just wondering because I know that sometimes you would say that a character that's really talkative and energetic could come across as annoying from other stuff we reviewed. So I was wondering.
Cough, Sonic, cough, cough.
Well, besides Sonic, you said it about in which case you're wrong, but for the record, but
No, fair.
but no, but other time because I remember other times we talked about it. Sometimes I even find this trope annoying. It really depends on how you play with it.
Yeah, you have
I
to
think.
be real careful because, like, you're riding a fine line between enjoyably, funny and, you know, like enjoyably annoying and just outright annoying, right? Like, it's a
Yeah.
fine line you're walking with that one when you do a character
Mhm.
like this.
And
And you have to
so
be
I
real
think
careful with it.
so that's why I think I asked if you think Nimona could be a required the character could be
Personally,
a required thing.
for me,
Like
I think Nimona as a character rides that line quite well. I
yeah,
never had any issues with her.
same, but I also usually really enjoy these characters, and I think she's a unique take on it because what excites her is the demolition and the violence. She's not excited, she's not necessarily excited about you know, things you would expect this character to be excited about. She's
Hmm.
excited about horrible things, basically. So, so I think it balances out well, and especially with her entire arc in the movie, and especially the ending where she thinks you know everyone hates her. I think it connects very well with that because it shows it we can basically say you could argue she's hiding behind this energy.
Hmm.
The movie shows quite a few times that she's trying to not dwell on this, and she pretends to, and she just wants to be happy-go-lucky all the time. And I think it adds a lot of dimension for her.
Yeah, that actually brings me to a good question, right?
Mhm.
This is pretty much the comic story, all of it, right? Like, there's
Eh,
nothing that comes
Again,
after this,
like
right?
I would say 40% ish.
Well, let me ask you this. Words. Let me ask you this, right? The movie ends with, okay, so there's a breach in the wall. The wall's open now, so we've got access to the wider world now. We can go out there and explore the wider world. Let me ask you, does the comic explore the wider world any, or is it just mostly all
Not,
here and that's kind of the story?
not that I remember.
Okay,
No.
no, that's fair. That is absolutely fair. So
The,
then let me ask you, would you want to see another movie to this, or do you think it's fine as it is and it doesn't
Actually,
need a
before we
sequel?
talk about this, I
Oh, sure,
think
sure.
there's just one thing I want to say about the ending did touch me. When she sacrifices herself, and we see that
Cough,
this
cough,
one
red
kid.
fucking phoenix, cough, cough movie. I see you. Cough,
Wait,
cough.
I just want to say that this ending, and I'm not saying this is a bad thing for the record. This ending is almost one to one the same ending as Gravity Rush 2, one of my favorite games ever.
Mm,
And the reason I mentioned that it's almost one to one the same is because, kind of like Gravity Rush 2, there's a good chance I'm not getting a sequel to any of them.
true.
I'm sad.
Very true. But also, cough, cough, very red phoenix, cough, cough, gonna be reborn, cough, cough. It's like, okay,
Yeah,
movie, I see you.
I,
It's
I
fine,
will
but I
say
see you.
I will say though that I did love that they cut them in the middle of the oh shit
Oh,
that
yeah.
again, like it's a cheap gag. Like again, when I saw it a few hours ago with a friend, like we got to that part and like she was sobbing because of the ending, but when this happened, she had this like that was so abrupt.
Hmm.
So I guess I guess I can see people already being kind of on the ending because although to be fair, in the comic it also kind of ends with Nimona basically. People think she's dead, but she's actually not. But it's more that in the comic she's going into hiding. So
Mm.
so something like that. Again, I don't really
No,
remember, but
again, like the movie definitely takes a more what feels like optimistic slash happy approach to it all, right? Like happy-go-lucky, optimistic stylization of it all, where the comic seems to be a bit more. I don't want to say like awful or pessimistic, but a bit more negative, quote unquote, if you will, by you talking about it.
yeah, I
Which again,
guess it's
there's
also
nothing wrong with that, right? It's very different approaches. Like
yeah,
I would
it's
say
something.
How to Train
I
Your
also
Dragon the
think
film is more positive. Again,
yeah,
like and this comes with it being an animated film and aimed at
though
probably a younger audience. They're
I
going
also
to take a
think
more positive approach
yeah,
than
I
like
was
the
about
books
to
do.
say that I was also about to say I know it's been published since then, but still, when you're starting as a web comic, you're basically your own boss and you can do whatever the hell you want.
True.
So let's say there are people, even if Netflix is a bit more light, light about all the, about the LGBTQ stuff than Disney. They probably still want a movie that kind of gives because kids are gonna see this. It's an animated movie,
Yes.
so they kind of need a glimpse of a good ending so that kids could so that kids won't be feel too sad by the end. I get that. So they want something a bit more optimistic. And for the record, it does work because you don't necessarily see Nimona. It's highly implied that she's back, but you don't necessarily see her again, like Gravity Rush 2. But you know,
Yeah, no, fair, fair.
hmm
Absolutely. And like finishing off here, all the characters here are quite enjoyable. Like even the director as the villain, right, and unwanting to like
hmm like
afraid of
the
change and
moment
everything is really
like
good.
the moment that kind of struck me as when Ambrosius tells her, there's a cannon aiming at the city, and she's like, "I know, I can't. I gave the order," and it's like, "Fuck,
Like yeah, she's
fuck, what a
willing to
bitch."
kill multiple people, destroy everything just to keep
hmm
just to kill Nimona and this monster, and also keep the city walled in. It's just yeah, like it. She's a good villain.
hmm
Like you don't get a
Definitely.
ton of her, but she's definitely a good villain, I would say.
hmm
But yeah, like going
Like,
back.
she has a presence. She's obviously compared to the main trio, she's not
Mhm.
as well developed, but at the same time, she gets the job done.
Yeah,
And before moving, actually,
she works
before
as an
moving
antagonistic
to
force.
yeah, but before moving to just wrapping this up, what did you think of the scene where Nimona impersonates Ambrosius and she murders him,
Oh, that
quote
was good.
unquote?
I loved that because like that was a good little twist that they did because I didn't even know. Like it never occurred to me that that might be Nimona and they're kind of doing stuff there. And then until the director kills Ambrosius and starts really hamming it up. And it's like, oh, okay, I see now. I understand now. But there for a bit, like, yeah, had no clue. There was nothing that keyed me in on that unless I
I,
missed it
I'm s- I'm asking you
because it
because
was good.
again, the first time I saw this with Jaya, and when this happened, and she again, we were both tricked by the movie too.
Hmm.
But when this happened, she was screaming over this, and she killed my ears. Okay, she murdered my fucking ears, and I love the scene for getting it for for tricking me, but I also hate it because ouch my ears.
Fair.
I'm very petty like that. But okay, but jokes aside, it was really well done. And again, if a movie can get a reaction like this out of an audience member,
Hmm.
that shows it's doing something right.
Yes, agreed. Or at the very least, it's going to stick with you because there's bad films that have gotten reactions like that out of people too. But And that's what you want, though,
Well, but at the same
right?
time, for the wrong reasons. Why, right? Like,
True, but
because let's say because let's say if people, there's a difference between people going over the director stabbing what she thinks is ambitious, but then people watching the room and seeing Tommy Wiseau shoot himself, right?
yeah.
Different reactions.
Oh, absolutely. Don't get me wrong, but I'm always that person who's going to argue, right? I,
You're
I.
tearing me apart, Nimona.
Oh
I'm
God.
sorry.
Oh God. I'm always going to argue, right, that I want there to be a reaction, something.
Yeah,
If I get
definitely.
nothing from your film, I'm, it's meh, right? Like,
Yeah, if you get nothing out of me, that means if I'm walking out of the experience not remembering anything, or the product didn't get anything out of me, that's worse than a bad movie for me.
agreed.
Like that,
Even
like
if your film is
something that leaves
technically good, I still just like yeah, I didn't waste my time with it, but at the same time, I feel like I could have gotten more, but I just didn't get anything, and that's always just kind of disappointing, right?
yeah,
Because that's
like
not what we
I
go to
don't.
these things for. That's not what we, watch them for, stuff like that. We want to
Yeah,
get
like
something from them.
there are probably movies like I don't have anything on top of my head right now, but there are movies that like I watched them, they were fine, but they went right over my head.
Mm, fair. But
So
finishing up, I suppose,
yeah,
if we have nothing else, I do want to go back to the question I posed earlier. Would you want a sequel from this? Would you want more after what we got from this one?
I'll be honest. Like it's an interesting question. I haven't really thought about it because I think, for one, the fact we even got this movie in general is a miracle.
True.
Now, the thing, if I want a sequel, Um, I'll tell you what. I think because I know Netflix picked up the production and everything, but in a way, but considering how some marketing went and considering Disney's Twitter, I think somewhere in there Disney still owns the rights.
Mm,
I am not a hundred. Take it with a grain of salt here, but I think it's not Netflix that would make the call on it.
fair, fair.
The mouse might have the word here, and if that's the case, I am not holding my breath for a sequel.
I mean, yeah,
That
like
being
if that's the
said,
case.
if Netflix has the rights, or who knows, maybe if Andy gets the rights back or something, I would be interested in seeing where they can go with a sequel because, like we mentioned, we don't really see the world outside of this kingdom. So, so I would like to see a bit more of it. Maybe there are people like Nimona out there. Or maybe there is a bit more to say to some of it. Then again, though, I feel if we get a sequel and it starts actually, going into the idea that there are people like Nimona, or if they try to explain her powers
Oh yeah,
or
they can't do
something,
that. I feel like that
I
ruins
feel,
the
yeah.
message.
So I feel like if so, that kind of limits you when you do a sequel because doing that takes away one of the core elements of the story.
Yeah, you have to be real
But
careful with that.
yeah, and so I think if they're going to do a sequel, what exactly is the sequel gonna be?
At the
Mm,
very least, I think personally, I don't know if I'd want a sequel, but I do want more. And this is where I come back to I kind of would enjoy seeing this as a show that's slowed
I
down a
was
bit,
about to
maybe
say
like a one season, maybe two season, where the finale is the same thing you got here from the movie, but it's just you get more of the characters and their relationships building up potentially.
something I would suggest if you know what I'm talking about. In Neo Genesis Evangelion.
Hmm.
So you know how after the show ended, the creator just basically did those remake movies where it's the same story as the show but a
There's
bit more
more.
touched up.
Yeah,
Huh?
there's a lot of that
Uh,
for
yeah,
Neon.
yeah. Yeah, so basically do the opposite of it. That it started as a movie, but then you can do a show which delves a lot more into it, right? Kind of
Yeah,
retell it as a show. That could be cool. I'll be down.
yeah, I would definitely be interested.
Hmm.
because like I said, like I enjoyed this enough that I would like to get more of it, right? And I think that's overall that's probably the best selling point I think I can give it is this was
Most
enjoyable enough,
definitely.
and there's definitely a lot of stuff here that I enjoyed that I would like to see more of it and see it gone into more so I can get more of it.
Yeah, most definitely. I agree. Regardless what would that thing be, I can't really tell you right now. But hey, if Nimona has a future, then you know what? Sign me on.
Mm-hmm.
I'll be there.
Agreed.
Well, with that said, anything else you have to add on the matter, or
Once again, go watch Nimona.
well, to be honest, if you haven't watched the movie and you're at this part of the podcast, then we spoiled the whole thing. So
Go
not
watch it
man.
anyways. You'll have
Yeah.
fun.
No, definitely, and also go watch it again. I believe this is a movie that I'm going to watch at least one more time, maybe even more in the future. I can see myself coming back to it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that being said, that's all for this episode of the Outcast. We hope you enjoy it. What do you think about Nimona as a movie, as a graphic novel? Would you like to see a sequel? What do you want to see done with these characters? You can tell us all about it in the comment section below, on our Twitter, which is Berkcast with a capital B, capital C, and on our Tumblr, which is Berkcast Team. So I was HC.
I was Wolf.
And we will see you all next time. Take care.
Bye bye.